Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. It is my pleasure to be facilitator of this afternoon session. My name is Jarosław Duraj, and I'm affiliated with Macau Ricci Institute and the University of St. Joseph in Macau. We are meeting here for the afternoon academic session, International Symposium, the 4th centenary of the birth of Ferdinand Verbiest, after beautiful morning ceremony and the afternoon visit in the ancient observatory. So now we are going to participate in this academic session, listening to different important papers that eminent scholars prepared for us. I'm happy to welcome especially the Ambassador of Belgium, Bruno Angelet, all distinguished guests, scholars, joining us on site here and also online. So let us start with a few words of introduction by Mrs. Carol Li Rafferty, Director of the Yale Center in Beijing.
Hello and good afternoon. Welcome to the Yale Center Beijing, Yale University's only university-wide center outside of its US campus, representing all of its 15 schools. I'm Carol Li Rafferty, an executive director of the Yale Center Beijing and also an assistant dean for the Yale School of Management. Today, I'm honored and delighted to be celebrating the 400th anniversary of the birth of Ferdinand Verbiest, and I am especially grateful for the collaboration with the Embassy of Belgium in Beijing, with the Macau Ricci Institute, the Beijing Center, and as well the Beijing Planetarium and Beijing Ancient Observatory for this very, very special event. Why is this so special? Ferdinand Verbiest, a Belgian, he is a distinguished astronomer and mathematician who worked very closely with Emperor Kangxi in the Qing dynasty. He is very much an inspiration for institutions such as Yale University because he dedicated his life to bridging the cultures between the East and the West, and he devoted his life to this. He is also the subject of late Yale historian Jonathan Spence's research on iconic historical figures who have been instrumental in cultural exchanges that happened through the centuries. I want to read a very special passage I found in Jonathan Spence's To Change China, which some of you have seen at the Beijing Center Library. This was a quote taken from his journal, probably in Latin, as Ambassador Angelet talked about this morning. As it was a beautiful night and the sky was clear, Kangxi asked me to give him the Chinese and European names for the stars appearing on the horizon. He himself named first those that he had already learned, then taking out a little celestial map that I had given him some years before, he began to calculate from the stars what hour of night it was, taking great pleasure in showing those around how much skill he had acquired in science. So by commemorating Verbiest through this special symposium, we're so delighted to be continuing this legacy of special friendships and encounters that have happened through the centuries. And we're also very honored to have a panel of very preeminent panelists and scholars put together by the Macau Ricci Institute and our collaborators for this very special occasion. As the motto for Yale University is Lux et Veritas, which is light and truth, we hope that this symposium will continue to bring light and truth, and we will carry the torch of conversations between different cultures and countries through the centuries. Thank you very much. And I want to extend also a special welcome to some of our special guests, including Ambassador Bruno Angelet from the Belgian Embassy, Qi Yue Guanzhang from the Beijing Planetarium and Ancient Observatory. And later, over video, we will have Governor Carl de Caluwe from West Flanders, the province of Belgium, where Ferdinand Verbies is from. So without further ado, I would like to welcome Ambassador Angelet for an opening address. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, dear friends. Director Li Rafferty, thank you very much for your kind words. And I would like to thank also Father Stefan Rotlin of the Macau Ritchie Institute and all the colleagues from Macau Ritchie Institute, Yale Center, and the Beijing Study Center. I'm, of course, very much honored by everything you do to pay tribute to my fellow citizen, Ferdinand Verbies, who was born 400 years ago. Now, when I say fellow citizen, I'm thinking that what I said this morning, you might hear it for a second time this afternoon, because many of you were there this morning. So I would say the advantage you get 2 times the same speech for the price of 1. But I will try to add a few things maybe to make it interesting. When I say my fellow citizen, a Belgian, the question is, how can you call him a Belgian? Because Belgium, the state of Belgium, was established only in 1830. And we are talking of a man who lived in the 17th century. Well, simply the truth of the facts. Carol, you said light and truth. So let's stick to what he said himself. And in the opus that he wrote, European Astronomy, he describes himself as a Belgo-Flemish, which is very amusing for people who know Belgian history, because there was little talk about Belgium at that time. Only Julius Caesar, just a little before Jesus Christ, was talking about the Belgians as the most brave people in Europe, but that's basically the only time we heard about the Belgians so far. The second amusing thing with Ferdinand Verbies is that he's talking about Europe and European astronomy at a time when in Europe, intellectuals and philosophers were not sure they knew what Europe was. Because until the 15th, 16th century, what we call Europe was basically Christianity. And it is only little by little during these times that people started to think, is there something specific of this continent? And is there something specifically European? And while philosophers were writing about that, you can think about Montesquieu describing the impressions of a prince of Persia, of Iran, traveling in Europe and describing Europe as an outsider. And Verbies is also talking about European astronomy. And why does he do it? Because the Chinese are quite puzzled with all these foreigners coming from somewhere, and they all put them in the same bag and say they are Europeans. So actually, in his opus that you just described, he described himself as a Belgo-Flemish and some others as that, but he's writing about European astronomy because for the Chinese people, it all was about Europe and European science. The little points I made this morning, and which I will take again now, is what is unique about Ferdinand Verbies. My good colleague, Johan, I don't know, from the embassy, you helped me very much to prepare, said, look, he was a genius, he was a great person, and I fully agree. But where I would like to add something to what he suggested is that a genius doesn't just come out of the sky. He's not a drop from the sky, although he's a Jesuit, a strong believer. He was inspired, but he's a child of his time. He was a child of a Europe that between the Renaissance and Enlightenment, the 17th century is a century that sits between Renaissance and Enlightenment, for those who are familiar with European history. At that time, as I said this morning, sorry to repeat myself, the nobility, princes, emperors, popes, the clergy, and the gentry, and the philosophers and intellectuals had a common language, written language, and that was Latin. In China, it might have been Mandarin. In Asia, it might have been Sanskrit for a while. But in Europe, it was Latin, which really unified Europe somehow. And there's probably also a reason why we can talk about European integration today. The written language was Latin, and there was something that we called, and philosophers called later on, the European Republic of Letters. As I said this morning, I will repeat, a Republic of Letters is a republic that stands above popes and emperors, both above the state and the church. It's an open space of intellectuals in Europe that were writing letters, and with printing later on, were sending books printed in Latin all over Europe. There is a little letter of Erasmus sent to his friend Thomas More. Erasmus lived then in Belgium and in Europe, and he was sending a letter to Thomas More in Latin because he had sent him a ton of French wine, And it is written in Latin, and he complains very much because while on the boat, the ton has been emptied by the salesman. And there's a nice little letter between two intellectuals in Latin. And that is what I wanted to say first. You must understand that Verbist is a child of a space, an open space in Europe where intellectuals were exchanging ideas, and no one, neither Pope, neither Emperor could stop them. And the second point, which is very important, is that I think the gifts and the skills of Verbist were also very much articulate and structured by the spirit of the Jesuit order. The Jesuit order, of course, Father Matteo Ricci was the first to say that the spirit of priests working in China should be humbleness, have empathy and deep respect for the Chinese civilization, learn Chinese, behave and be dressed like Chinese, and try to bring to Chinese intellectuals, the emperor, what they are looking for. And that was clearly science, innovation, and looks, or light and truth. The fourth point that is very important is, of course, that China then, at that time, had centuries of advance in astronomy compared to Europe. When the Jesuits arrived here, they discovered actually that China had a very deep and rich civilization, to this point that actually Ferdinand Verbist, before leaving for China, had prepared himself to go to Latin America. He was ready to go to Peru, had studied Spanish, but people told him actually, and Matteo Ricci called on the Vatican to bring much more Jesuits. There's much more to do in China because of its rich civilization. So Verbist was convinced to come to China, study Chinese, and in the spirit of Matteo Ricci also was very much impressed by Chinese civilization, respected it, and tried to integrate it in his own thinking. And the last little point, which is very important, is, of course, the attitude of Emperor Kangxi. Kangxi, for our friends who know much more about Chinese history and about Emperor Kangxi, was apparently young, already very curious, intellectually interested, wanted to learn and study, and was quite critical. He was asking his Mandarins. His Mandarins first asked him, bring us, Emperor, the best astronomers from China, until Kangxi discovered that they themselves had put Verbist actually under house arrest. And he was very angry because you are asking me to find the best astronomers in China, but you have put themselves, you have locked them up in a place here close to the Forbidden City. So the spirit of Kangxi. To conclude, yes, I think Ferdinand Verbist is a man we really have to cherish. A genius and humble man of light and truth, a scientist, but he's also a child of his time. And I think the conclusion is that we probably must be inspired by him, but also by Emperor Kangxi, and the respect and the interest we had for civilizations all over Earth, and trying to build on this to get people closer to better manage the world in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, dear Ambassador, for this inspiring reflection.